good.
Okay.
I'm still working on it.
Okay, let's call the meeting to order. Do you want to do a roll call?
Mary.
Here.
Dashlet.
Here.
Tour.
Here.
Lautenbach.
Here.
Meverden.
Here.
Havoc.
Here.
Schmidt.
Here.
Okay. We're holding this meeting in compliance with the open meeting law. With the approval of the agenda, I would like somebody to make a motion to move.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
Oh, I was gonna say, you've got the 9A? Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to make that motion?
I was gonna ask for a motion to move item 9A under new business for the redevelopment authority developer proposal. I'd like to move that to immediately follow item 7, which is public comment. Rest of the agenda would stay the same.
Okay. Was there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Right?
Opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved with the change. Okay, approval of the minutes to the May 18th meeting.
Hold on. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended, please?
Oh, okay.
Moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is adopted as amended. Okay. Approval of the meeting minutes then.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Steve, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, minutes are approved. Consideration of bills and conference attendance. Anyone have any questions, or can I get a motion to approve?
So make a motion. Second.
Okay, would you do a roll call, Aaron?
Meverden.
Yes.
Schmidt.
Yes.
Dashlet.
Yes.
Mary.
Yes.
Lautenbach.
Yes.
Tour.
Yes.
Havoc.
Yes.
Okay. Well, next item is public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address the council? Jean, would you come forward and state your name then, and limit it to 3 minutes, please?
However, I would suggest that we read the verbiage below public comment,
Okay.
because it cannot be germane about anything that is on our agenda.
Okay. Do you want her to wait until we're talking later and not do it under public comment?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody want to make public comment about something that is not an agenda item? Is there anyone that would like to make a comment? Okay, last call. Anybody wanting to make it? If not, we're going to move on to the next item, which the 9A that we moved up. Okay. Okay.
So 9A,
Is the redevelopment authority.
that is correct, and the reason, thank you, Scott, for making that motion to move that up. And Marty Olenichek has another meeting, so he is online here with us if anybody has any questions. But the RDA made a motion to accept a developer at their last meeting, and now it is for the council to just look at and more or less adopt the RDA's recommendation. So I will open up the floor. Marty is the chair of the RDA, the president of the RDA is online with us. If anybody has any questions, we also have Scott, myself, here, and Amber as well. If anybody has any questions, it is in everybody's packet.
I didn't get the packet. It wouldn't download for me. Do you have a copy of it? I'm sorry.
Does everybody else have the packet in front of them?
And we're talking about the packet that begins developer proposal comparison for Block 10 redevelopment.
That is correct.
Yep.
And then there's some comparisons in there. If anybody has any questions of why, like I said, Marty is also online with us. If anybody has any questions for him. Scott, do you have a question?
No, I was just gonna say that from a very high level, obviously being on that committee, we were at the point in which we needed to decide which developer we wanted to go with. We had a couple of meetings, met with both the developers. Gary had, who's our partner, who's put together this comparison for us, had gone through and put together kind of like this side-by-side easy chart for comparison purposes. And it was just, I believe it was last week that we had our meeting that we finally come to the conclusion as a group that Commonwealth was the better developer to partner with moving forward. So, Marty, I guess I'd open it up kind of a very high level just so the council is brought up to speed. Anything to add, Marty?
See, you covered it pretty well. So we only got two proposals, both are qualified, groups that have been in the business for a long time, that could do the project. Just seemed like Commonwealth was a better fiscal choice for us. They needed less additional assistance from the city. They also have tons of experience, and they also like the fact that their project would comply with our parking requirements, that be able to put parking under the building compared to the Mosaic one. So there was a unanimous vote by the RDA, and so we're hoping that the council approves.
Marty, a question? This is Jake. Do we have control over exterior design, appearance?
I didn't quite catch that.
Do we have control over exterior design appearance?
Oh, yes. So what will happen next is a formal development agreement will have
Oops.
sort of a negotiation still. And I would imagine both the RDA and the city council would want to be a part of that development agreement and would approve it. And, we can require lots of different things in terms of design, density, all sorts. So what they submitted is basically just a concept, and it'll grow from there. So Jake, I think we got plenty of opportunities to either require or suggest that it would be any type of specific things you want to see in that development.
Okay, thank you, Marty.
So I guess just kind of to wrap everything together and to, I guess, put a little light is now that we have the overall design picked out, picture this as building a house and there's allowances to everything of, we don't have to decide that we're having pink siding. It can be white, or it can be, that is, now we will start those conversations of 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms. Would we rather a couple more 2 bedrooms and maybe a couple less 1 bedroom apartments? And things like that now is where you start to really get into that portion of it.
Was there a reason why we want townhouses there? I'm just curious, because that's a pretty expensive thing, and we're trying to do affordable housing.
That was on the park side, facing the park, because we only had the one quadrant. We didn't get the whole block, so there's a quarter of it that would be the southwest corner. Those houses are going to stay.
Those
But-
3 houses are staying in the southwest corner. The northwest corner is
Yeah.
where that,
Yeah, they
where those
redid that one
townhouses would
just
go.
today, yeah.
And so just to, low to moderate income housing is income based. So if you see the range and why is there such a big gap of range in 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, it's income based. So that's where those numbers come from. Obviously, the more income, the more they're gonna pay for rent.
But typically a townhome is 2 stories, correct?
Yes.
Townhouse? So we could get 2 apartments out of that. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just asking what was the thought
I
process?
think it was 8. I don't remember the exact breakdown, Steve, but it was nice, affordable housing for families, working class families that have a couple of kids that want to be across from a park. You've got the large 3-story type complex on one half of the block, and those would blend in better in that park setting with the neighboring homes.
Well, and it also gives it gives you a range from 1 bedroom all the way up.
To-
It gives you a far greater range of, I would imagine, doesn't it?
3-bedroom apartment is still on 1 level, and a 3-bedroom townhouse is 2 levels.
Well, no, I understand that, but,
So I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just wondering why we went that way.
Flexibility, options.
So, and just to, so we sent out a request for developers. The developers, the two developers that responded to it, they both put their proposals together of what their needs and what they could put the best bang for their buck on the land that we had available to try to capture the most amount of bedrooms for, say, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom apartments that we could put on this, let's call it 3/4 of the block, right? We have one whole half that would be facing east, and then approximately about half of the west side of that block that we will be developing.
Okay, Amber?
So we've got a couple of things that played a role in here. First of all, the developers looked at the redevelopment plan that was adopted, I think almost a year ago now. In that plan, we called for apartments transitioning to townhomes for the park. The second factor that had to be put into play here was because we have CDBG funding to remove the blight, what we have there for bedroom units has to go back. So we have 1 4-bedroom unit, we have to put a 4-bedroom unit back. So both developers proposed putting that 4-bedroom unit in the townhomes.
Okay, and who retains ownership of it? They do?
Developer.
The developer does.
For a set amount of time, or can they finish it and sell it off?
They've got their own management team,
Team,
property
yeah.
management teams.
Yeah.
Okay,
So this isn't condos, this is rental apartments. This is lease rental apartments, not monthly.
Well, they probably.
Month to month, right.
Contractual, I'm assuming there's probably a,
You'd enter into a,
12.
probably a 1-year, 12-month agreement.
Okay, all right.
You need a motion for that.
Right on the same
Yeah,
order
yes.
as Andrew Terrace.
Just that,
Same thing.
we just
Yeah.
needed one at
That's
council,
like your lease.
Yeah, actually, we could. I
because
mean,
it's a redevelopment authority, so it can go straight to.
Go straight to council, and unless anybody has any more discussion, we could actually make a,
Special council meeting.
yes, right after this, so.
further question?
Do we need to do any motion here? No. Okay.
No,
Okay, then we are gonna go back to 8 and public safety facility building update.
Scott, if you wanna just touch base of where we're at from our last meeting?
Sure. So we were due to have a meeting last night that was unfortunately postponed. There'll be a meeting that is gonna be rescheduled. But going back to our last meeting that we had, Jim from Bayland was in attendance at that meeting. He had brought updated drawings and plans. There were several changes and options that were discussed at that meeting. Jim had literally just emailed and sent an updated plan for discussions that would have taken place last night, but he had just sent that late yesterday afternoon, to which I forwarded the body, the ad hoc committee, late last night, with a couple of comments. From a grand 30,000 foot view or elevation standpoint, things are coming together, I believe. I'm hoping that we'll have some solidified plans and budgetary numbers probably in the next 4 to 5 weeks, I would say. Yeah, so
So are you gonna have more than one plan, you know, plan A, plan B? if
that is the
plan A
intent.
don't work?
That is the intent, yes.
Okay, I understand the time before we did because it was, you know.
We didn't
the
really have
timeframe
enough
wasn't
time,
there,
yeah.
so.
That is the intent, yes. So barring, I mean, there's not a whole lot there, but things are progressing. That's all I've got.
Okay, well then we'll move on to the Med Center sale update.
The medical medical board transition team, we met last week and went through with Barry. Sam was not able to be on with us. He was actually traveling, but Barry, one of the buyers, went through everything with the city, with the transition team and the medical board. Everything is more or less pending on them getting their license, is just waiting for the state to come up with their verdict of where we're at with our license, and that's really what's driving where we're at right now. There was, I mean, a lot of questions, but it was, I think, a lot of just little things. I think everything moving forward is just a matter of when they get their license and where we're at. And I'm just gonna, Amber or John, if you have anything to add to that. But that was, a lot of it is the status of their license and when they get their license, so.
They don't have anything to share. Have they given more information that the Med Center was asking for yet, or haven't they got to that point? Benefits and the big questions that they have, did any of that get talked about?
It was discussed, it was talked about. There's some insurance benefits that we're waiting. We have some kind of, I'm gonna say, short tail answers, not exactly what we want, probably not exactly what the Med Board wants to date. But there.
Yeah, I don't need to know the specifics. I was just curious if that part of it seemed to be the sorest spot.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of, as far as them sitting down talking with the employees, they've had a very brief conversation with the employees, I guess I'm gonna say. I think maybe John maybe can answer a little bit more of that, being on the Med Board, to where they're at to date and how many employees as far as the transition team goes. Barry is more of a financial guy. Sam is more of a, I think, internal, feet on the ground kind of guy. So we got a lot of, what I'm gonna say is generic answers to questions that were proposed.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, Amber? Okay, well then we'll move on to the next item, which is the medical board status. Okay. Now, does everybody have a copy of the proposal ordinance? Okay,
Proposal.
I'm not really sure, Mayor, point of order, I'm not,
yeah,
under old business medical board status, I'm not
Oh,
really
oh.
sure what this is regarding.
okay, yeah, okay. Well, we had talked about at some point when they went to, we have to dissolve the board.
Okay.
And then at some point, if, once the board is dissolved, there's still some straggler things to do, we could form a committee. But the board at some point needs to be dissolved. So are we gonna,
The documentation is under the agenda for special council.
it's on for, just for the special, so we don't have to talk about it here? Okay,
All right, so
Okay.
this is a discussion rather than addressing it
okay.
in total, is that correct? Is that what we're
Okay.
applying, or is this, do we need to do, it doesn't say, do we?
There's no action item on this.
There's no
item.
action
It's not an
item,
action
yeah.
item, the action item will come in the special council meeting, is that right?
Correct.
This would be discussion.
The
Okay.
only thing that I would ask the mayor though, Madam Mayor, is if at this time, if you had anything that you wanted to ask Jean Marsh, the administrator from the medical board,
Okay.
if you.
Well, Jean would like to address it, so maybe this would be a good time for Jean to come up and make her comments.
Before we get started, is there a reason why we didn't, put in the motion for the developing agreement? I mean, what
Because
was
it's an
this?
authority, so
Goes right
redevelopment
to
authority,
council.
it can go straight to council.
Okay,
And be adopted at the council level, which is in the
Okay.
meeting.
Marty can
Okay.
lead whenever he wants.
Yeah, yep.
Actually, Marty, if Marty needs to, he could check
That's
out.
why
I
wanted to ask,
apologize,
because
Marty.
He was here and nothing was, you know.
Thank you, Lee. I apologize, Marty, but thank you for coming on
Yeah.
with us.
Sorry about that, Gene.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I could stick around or not, so.
okay, Jean,
Hi, if you don't know me, I'm Jean Marsh, the administrator at Oklahoma Medical Center. I just wanted to speak a little bit about the regulations that nursing homes have to face. I mean, what the council chooses to do is up to you, but there are some really critical components of compliance that could have an impact on the city and the city council together. There is a regulation called F-837. Refers to the governing body. The governing body, and I can briefly summarize it for you, A nursing home is required to have a governing body, and for us, thus far, we have had our board of directors. If you would opt to dissolve the board of directors and perhaps name a committee instead, the legal liability for any actions would fall onto the city council itself, because you are the governing body then. A committee does not suffice. So say, for example, surveyors come in and cite us. And they want to see, first of all, if you have become the governing body, that you have adopted all of the prior actions that our board of directors has had. And if not, what are you changing on each of them, and how are you changing them? And those are questions that would come up from the federal and state survey team. So it's, you know, it's easy to do some things, but the implications come back to the actual nursing home. The skilled nursing home regulations are gonna hold a lot more weight at this point if the city council is indeed the governing body versus the board of directors. Our board has been, you know, there all along. They are more or less your experts. They understand finance. They understand all of the difficulties we deal with day in and day out with admitting residents, with people who don't want to pay their bill, all kinds of situations that the board deals with. And the city would then be responsible for dealing with all of those. So I just wanted to make that point to you, that it is a very important aspect of the federal regulations. I do have a copy here in case someone would like to take a copy. There are two parts to it. The first one deals with the governing body, and the second goes with the appointment of an administrator. About 2 years ago, the feds came out with an update to this regulation, and it stated that the administrator must be directed to report all actions, inactions, concerns, grievances, resident right abuses, etc., to the governing body. And this happened because an administrator somewhere chose to hide the fact that the state had come in and was closing the facility for multiple deficiencies, and no one knew. So that was made part of our own board of directors, passed that as a requirement as well, that I'm required to report everything that I do to them, and I have been doing that on a regular basis. Questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Okay, does anyone else want to make a comment about this? Otherwise, we are going to move on to the next item. Okay. Well, the next item is new provider for group life insurance benefit. Oh,
So you're looking at dissolving the board then, basically on the date of the closing, or are you guys looking at dissolving the board before it closes?
Hasn't been determined yet.
Okay.
I actually couldn't hear what she was saying, so.
Her question, Madam Mayor, was are we looking at dissolving the board as the date it closes, or looking to dissolve the board as soon as possible?
We're going to have the further discussion when we do the special common council, so we'll address that at that point. But right now, for this meeting, we're not going to make a decision on that. Okay, so is there anything else? Otherwise, we're moving on to the group life insurance benefit. Okay. Now, who has the information?
Who's this, Amber?
Amber, go ahead with the insurance.
So our life insurance provider that we currently have is Epic Life Insurance Company. They gave us notice that as of July 1st, they will no longer be doing life insurance benefits. They're getting out of the business. So our broker, The Benefits Inc., has found a new provider. The new provider is called The Standard. They agreed to do a 3-year rate lock and the rates that they are providing us are actually a little bit less than what we're currently paying. I wanna say it's like, it comes out to be about $30 to $40 less per month than what we currently pay. We provide life insurance coverage at $35,000 for police officers, $25,000 for regular employees, full-time employees. And then we have been doing a $10,000 policy for firefighters, $5,000 for EMS. It had been talked about a few years ago about why are they different? They should be the same. So with this new company, we had them rate firefighters and EMS all at $10,000. So even bumping up the EMS from 5 to 10, we're still $30 to $40 less expensive than we're currently paying. The total cost is around $230 to $250 a month.
For everybody?
Yep.
Per person?
Not everybody, that's statewide.
Okay. Are you looking for a motion to approve a change at this point?
It's actually on the special council meeting to follow, because we have to get this done ASAP, because as of July 1st, Epic won't. Now, if we didn't, it's not the end of the world, we just wouldn't have any coverage for anyone during the gap. But if we approve it tonight, then tomorrow morning I'll log in and sign the documents, and we'll be up and running for July 1st.
And reading the documentation, we're pretty much same old all the way across the board?
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions for Amber? Go.
Do we need a motion and stuff to?
That's in a meeting, the next meeting.
Next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, that is.
Another one, okay.
Okay, a public works vehicle for personal use. Okay, is that?
I can, I guess, start this
Yeah.
off. I think the mayor asked that this would be put on the agenda. This is something that's been talked about at the public works level, I think 3 times now since I've been here. I think Councilmember Schmidt had asked in reference to putting this on there. I have always, since I've been here, I've taken my truck home with me, whether I've had to, I haul our boat from Kewanee down to, or from Algoma down to Kewanee because it gets serviced at night, or if there's an issue at night, usually I just touch base with Lee and contact with Lee as the Public Works Chair. Hey, I'm just so you know, I'm bringing my truck down. I don't have a problem with that at all. I think Councilmember Schmidt is I think looking to, and I don't want to speak for you, but okay, look to take the truck home a lot more. There's just a lot of days it's, to be honest, not convenient for me to take it home. I have, but for right now, because we've became the fire department, I have a place to park it inside here. I don't at home. But I guess if this is something that the council is in agreement with, it saves me a phone call talking to Lee. I think somebody had brought it to, I think, the city's attention about 6-8 months ago that my truck is in town 4 or 5 days a week and I'm having lunch in town. I'm not sure whose work truck that is, but it is not mine or any of my employees that are in Kewanee 4 or 5 days a week having lunch down at Kunkel's Corner, or whatever it's called today. Anchors Away, I think. I'm not sure how that came to light, or if that's a City of Kewanee truck, because they do look a lot identical if you don't read the sticker on it, but that is not us. So, but Kevin, if you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, I was looking at the amount of time Matt spends in the city of Algoma, and it's basically 7 days a week. Because when I'm on patrol, I see him personal vehicle at the street department all the time, and I figured, well, we let the police chief take his car home, and he's not in town as much as this administrator / public works is. 7 days a week, I thought it'd be beneficial for Matt to have the vehicle just take it home. Because if we need something, he jumps what he has to do and he runs back to town in the middle of the night. I just figured it would be fair that he takes it home also, and that's really what I wanted to talk about.
I mean, he spends a lot of time in summer at the marina during the weekends, and then in winter, I mean, it's only right that he'd have a vehicle to drive in, because he's usually here by 2, 3 o'clock in the morning if there's a storm.
Or if he leaves from Kiwanee, maybe he runs to Green Bay to pick something up,
Right.
then he needs an Algoma, he doesn't have to call Lee and say, hey, Lee, can I do this today? And
Yeah.
I just figured it made more sense, and I wanted to talk about it in 5 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah, you know, as long as, I don't have a issue with that, as long as it is parked and not used for personal use and all that,
Right.
and that sort of stuff, or transporting family or whatever.
Right.
But, yeah, I don't foresee any issues, beyond that. You know, what's half a gallon of gas, right, you know, we're not talking a great deal. Although, who knows?
Is there a way to put that on our website somehow? You taking the truck home is this big a problem? I couldn't care less, and like he said, you're here all the time, but somebody's gonna have a big problem with it.
Somebody 6 months ago already did have a big
I
problem
know,
with it.
I've heard about
wasn't
it, I've
us.
heard about Randy, so,
And, you
and
know,
I always say, that's this big a problem.
I guess I'm gonna go back to what I originally, if our boat is going down to Akron Marine to get serviced, I call Lee, just so you know, Lee, I'm taking our boat down to Akron Marine. I drop it off there at the end of the night. I take my truck home, I drive back up here in the
And
morning, I
don't
go to
even think
work.
you need to do that. but-
3 days later, you know, to be honest, I can lock my truck up in my shop here at the city of Algoma, and it's just completely fine. I don't have a place to park my truck underneath the roof that it's locked up. There will be days, I guess, what I would, concur with Kevin, or, you know, if you're okay with it, I don't have to call Lee and say, hey, Lee, is it all right if I take my truck home? I'm picking this up, or I'm going right to a meeting to Green Bay, or you know. It's probably not gonna happen much, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, maybe that's.
It doesn't
better.
happen now.
Maybe it's a better plan to let it at your discretion and instead of just saying, take the truck home,
Yeah.
right?
Would this just be specific to you, Matt, or to other Public Works employees as well?
Just, I believe it'd be, yes, just to me.
I was just thinking him, cause he's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't open that door for him.
No.
Originally
No.
started out with him as being the director, it was just him, because he comes and goes and does
Correct, but I'm
stuff.
just
I mean,
saying
anybody
with
else, they all live in
Succession
town,
planning
so.
and succession planning, development, as things change in the future. I just didn't know if this was just so specifically just for yourself.
Just to me.
Okay.
Yeah, cause previous public works directors, I think Gary Poppy took the truck home, and
Do we
just
need
like the
act-
police chief would've took the car home if he lived in the city. I mean, we had made an exception with Randy, but
Yeah,
otherwise.
that's the stickers that you don't live in the city.
And-
Same with Randy, that's the complaint I've heard, is the truck makes it all the way to Kiwanee, all that way.
And I'll be, I agree with
That's
you
where I'm going on
wholeheartedly.
vacation next week.
If when I live
Yeah.
in the city, when I have residency here, I will probably take my truck home every day just for the convenience of
Yep.
Right.
being 3 blocks, 6 blocks, 9 blocks away.
Yep.
Need
But-
action?
You want motion?
I
It would-
make a motion
Okay.
to
There-
approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay, expanding city limits?
Yeah, so this is something that we had a very broad conversation. It was brought to our attention at the Public Works. There was no formal motion to do anything. This is more or less the start of a conversation piece that was brought from Public Works. I also got in touch with Scott Felt, the county administrator. These are some conversations that started way back with the county level and administrators from Jared Hine from Algoma, Fred Schnook with the city of Kiwanee, and Jack Seidel from the village of Luxembourg. But there is a big need and look, and that it started at that high level, and just to kind of carry the conversation of looking to where there is properties for developers or for people to buy land. I think everybody knows in the county, we're not making any more of it. There is a lot of agricultural land. I don't believe that there is a farmer on the market that is looking to sell agricultural land. We do have some lots in the city. On the west side of the city, we do have some area that could possibly be available for development.
Yeah, we have a subdivision too on the northwest corner.
We have a subdivision on the
That's not
northwest
open.
corner that, some of those lots are already owned. Some of them you can't get your hands on. I'm getting a lot of conversation, a lot of talk of we don't want to leave the city limits, but we want to be as far west of the city limits as we can. There's a 15-degree temperature difference between, you know, being down closer, obviously, to the lake versus being out to the west. So this is a conversation piece. There's a lot of direction on how we can move forward, what we can look at. Like I mentioned, Scott Felt is here with us. He'd be more than happy to answer any questions about the possibility of annexation, if we ever would get that far, and how does that work, and how could we go about that. But I'm gonna just open up the floor here for a 5-minute, more or less conversation, question and answer.
Good. Why don't Scott, would you mind doing a little song and dance for us?
I don't know about song and dance.
Okay.
You haven't seen me dance yet.
Okay, all right.
Never heard you sing either.
Never heard you sing either.
That's that, or sing, and maybe you don't want to. Afternoon, everyone. I'm Scott Felt. I'm the county administrator. Received a call from Matt and happy to come over. What we're talking about is our future. As you know, back in 2018, the county did a housing study. And if you need a summary of that housing study, just email me and I can send it to you. What it basically says is that we need housing from the top to the bottom, whether it's apartments, whether it's senior living, whether it's single-family residence, whether it's multi-unit apartments, we need it all. So the question then comes down to, where is it going to be built and how is it going to be built? Well, at least from my standpoint, the easiest way to go about this is to look to the cities and villages, the municipalities themselves. And why would you look there? Because you already have utilities, you have sewer, you have water, you have streets, you have a lot of the amenities that folks are looking for. Plus, from a zoning standpoint, a lot of that is already in there. So from what does that mean for the cities of Algoma and Kewaunee? Well, in some ways you need to look at your comp plan, your 10-year comp plan, see where that's at. And then as a city council, you need to determine yourselves how you want to plan for that growth. Because there's a variety of ways that you can do this. You can do it organically, which means that developers just come, they identify a piece of property, they then approach the city and try to purchase and try to get them to agree to having streets put in and sewer and water and the like. Or what can happen is the city from its plan or the like could decide to purchase property itself to help spur the growth themselves. I am not going to direct to you or make any recommendation as to what you should or should not do. I know that at least for the village of Luxembourg, they have some property that they own that they can continue to develop some properties. The city of Kewaunee is close to its capacity. There's onesies and twosies within the city limits, but I know there is some discussion about possibly trying to expand that and seeing if the city and the county want to somehow partner into promoting some more housing development. From what I've seen from the plan as well, Algoma is in some ways in a very similar situation as the city of Kewaunee. You have onesies and twosies, you have things there, but you don't necessarily have land available for a developer. I've had a number of different conversations with a couple different developers, and one of the first things they always ask me is, where's the land? So, do you have land available? And so, I communicate that to you, not to tell you to do something, but to let you know what I'm hearing. More often than not, if you're going to want some development, then the developer is going to have to know that there is land available and that it is available at a reasonable price. What reasonable means depends on the developer and depends on the landowner. Again, I leave that up to you. We have recently, I put together a meeting, Tim Tremmel, who's the president of Bank of Luxembourg. We just had a meeting, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, where we had a number of major employers, some from Algoma, some from Kewaunee, and some from Luxembourg, to talk about communicating to the county board the need for additional housing. Because again, from the county standpoint, we are very limited in what we can do from a housing standpoint, because again, it's the townships, it's the cities, it's the villages. They're the ones that do the zoning. They're the ones that do the approval. So the county is trying to be a partner, and we're more than willing to try to be a partner with the city of Algoma or with the villages or the towns to try to bring in some more housing. But I think in this respect, from a city standpoint, if I do make a recommendation, I think that the council needs to look at their comprehensive plan. They need to identify where they want additional growth to take place, what type of additional growth, whether that's single family, whether that's multifamily or the like. And then last but not least, what specific steps does the city want to take to help to promote or encourage that growth? I've done my song and dance. I'll try to answer any questions that I can.
Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry. He was there first. Councilman Maverde.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. The 2018 housing study that you're referring to, just out of curiosity, in ballpark, 30,000 foot elevation, like how short, was there a number?
Hundreds, if not thousands.
Okay.
Yes.
Annexation, not super familiar with, put that into layman's terms. How does that work?
Annexation, what can happen, though you have to have, and the lawyer will be able to do much better than I will. With annexation laws, what can happen is the city is able to annex land that is outside of its jurisdictional limits. More often than not, I believe that the landowner itself has to petition to become part of it. On rare occasions, you can do I'll call it forced annexation, but those are rare instances. More often than not, what happens, and I'll give a real good example, is let's say that a developer buys a 40-acre piece of property that is adjacent to the city limits. And from the agreement with the city, what happens is the city has agreed that they're going to extend a street and put out services for water, electricity, and sewer. Then what happens is that developer, who's now the owner of that land, will petition the city to now become a part of the city, of which the city would then approve that petition, and now those jurisdictional lines would be changed to include that 40-acre parcel. Am I correct, Counselor?
That is a good summary.
Thank you.
Sure.
Last question.
Sure.
Are there any funds available or help available from the county for the municipalities for funding land acquisitions, developments?
That is a gray question. Not a great question, a gray question. In the respect that specifically, we do not have a specific fund that says for housing. We have an economic development fund. We have funds that are available. The question comes, and the county has the authority to therefore enter into a partnership with the city and to purchase property and extend water and sewer and the like and be able to do those types of things. That would depend on what the agreement or contract would be between the municipality and the county. And so I, as administrator, cannot speak for the board. I have put this issue, and I believe that Mayor Haskey can attest to this, is that I have been talking about housing because from my standpoint as county administrator, probably the biggest long-term financial challenge for the county is development. We have had for the past decade net new construction of under 2%, and usually it's been hovering just under 1%. And with levy limits, that makes things very difficult. And you experience the same thing as a city. If you don't have growth, your net new construction really then limits your ability to pay bills, to pay your employees, and to do things that you need to do as a city. So am I willing to try to move forward with that and really have those discussions? Absolutely I am, because I believe growth in Algoma is good for Kewaunee County. Growth in Kewaunee is good for Kewaunee County, and I'll even go so far as growth in Algoma is good for the city of Kewaunee. Growth throughout the county is good for the rest of the county. I'm sorry, Councilman Mary?
Well, my question was, involved annexation. Council had pointed out that in an annexation scenario, that the county or the township would be due quid pro quo on the taxes? Is that?
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Counselor, what you have seen a lot of times now is you're seeing what are called, I don't know if they're called territorial agreements or extraterritorial agreements. What you're seeing from state statutes is that the city can annex township land and there's little to nothing that a township can do about it from a statutory standpoint. So a lot of times what happens is towns have started to enter into agreements with cities and villages regarding annexation. So that way, because what happens a lot of times in other areas is you'll see this subdivision that is built out and it's just outside of the city limits and is a major property tax revenue source for the town, but then once it's annexed, that town loses all that revenue and they receive no recompense for it. And that's why you see many times now townships having some type of agreement, or what you've even seen with some townships, what they'll do is they'll try to incorporate as a village or a town and do whole sections to therefore prevent the annexation from a city or a village.
So
Anytime I'm wrong, please jump in, Counselor.
So there isn't a statutory rule that says you've got to do this?
Absolutely not. In fact, and that's what has spurred a lot of these agreements, is because what was starting to happen is you were starting to see these annexations by cities of basically the prime land from the town that was revenue generating, and then the towns would lose that property tax revenue, and then that would have a major impact upon their budget. And and statutorily, that was all completely legal, and that is the reason why you now have towns and cities more often than not come into some type of an agreement that will therefore allow for that annexation, but there's an agreement as to how that will take place.
Okay, so it essentially then becomes an agreement between two private parties, the city and the township. Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Other questions?
Any other questions?
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly. And I can stick around if we want to talk about more of that, plus if there's questions about the jail, I'll loiter a little bit as well regarding the jail. So, thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, then we'll move on to item number 10, agenda for next meeting. Does anyone have things they would like to pass on to Matt to put on the agenda for next time? Okay. Our next meeting is set for Tuesday, July 19th at 4 p.m. Is that an okay time for everyone? Okay. Then the only thing we need now is a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Right?
Opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned. And do we want to take a little bit of a break before going and go right into the next one? Go right into the next one, okay.
As long as everybody else, all
Okay.
council members are.
Okay, well then we will go on to the special common council meeting. Call it to order. Would you do a roll call again, Aaron?
Mehring.
Here.
Dashlet.
Here.
Boer.
Here.
Lautenbach.
Here.
Meverden.
Here.
Habig.
Here.
Schmidt.
Okay. Okay, the meeting's in compliance with the open meeting law. I need approval of the agenda or changes if somebody needs to make a change to it.
So move. Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Right?
Opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. New business. First item, resolution 1129-2022.
A resolution authorizing the city administrator to enter into an agreement with The Standard for group life insurance.
Okay, good. Okay, Steve made a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Lee second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the resolution is approved. Next item, a resolution, redevelopment authority develop.
Resolution 1130-2022, a resolution selecting a developer for work on redevelopment area number 2.
Okay, Steve made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is it Kevin second? Okay, could you do a roll call on that one?
Dashlet,
Yes.
Pavic,
Yes.
Boer,
Yes.
Mehring,
Yes.
Lautenbach,
Yes.
Meverden,
Yes.
Schmidt.
Yes.
Okay. We'll move on to item C, ordinance 835. Okay, this is repealing the code section establishing the medical board. Okay. Are there any comments about this before we vote on it?
So this is to dissolve the medical board?
Yes. There,
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
So what this is this was myself, Amber, and the mayor had a conversation about the next steps of how we're going to move forward to pull this out. The day is coming. How do we wanna look into this? And what day do we wanna start to look at it, okay? After our last council meeting, there was some more discussion. Our team sat down and met with the new owners and the medical board to discuss our transitioning and moving forward. And there's been, I think, still to date, some unclarity to what, it boils down to what day is gonna be the last day. I think is probably the hard fact of where is that number? What day is it? Okay? Nobody knows what day it is, and it's really driven on this license. All right? So the mayor herself was at the med board, again, meeting today. They had, I think, quite an extensively long meeting. But it is here before you. There was questions that arose. What is it gonna take? How does it work? What are we gonna do? You have it before you today to start to look through this and how we wanna move. Mayor, do you have anything to add to that, or is that?
Okay. The main discussion at the med board today is the concern of the fact on the very last page where it said it'll take effect 5 days after the posting, and the board would rather have it be 5 days after the closing date, that they would stay in operation as a board until they turned it over to the new guy. John, do you have comments about what transpired today?
Well, that's essentially it. We're looking for something where the date of closing triggered the elimination of the medical board. We felt that it was important to keep the medical board in place until such time as it was no longer needed.
Okay.
The transition team would stay in place if the medical board dissolved, and who from the medical board would be on that team? Do you know?
If the medical board would dissolve, then there would not be a transition team anymore.
Okay.
Then it would be, you're it. This is the transition team. Then the council would then have oversight of the medical center until the day it was closed. All right? And I apologize, Tony. I am sorry, but Tony from Davis and Kelthau is the city's attorney, representing the city in this matter. Tony is also here with us. I was asked by the mayor if he could be present for this meeting, if any council had any questions, legal questions for Tony. So he is here with us as well.
So then, Tony, I do have a legal question. Since this F-837 governing body was just brought up, so basically then the administrator would be working for this governing body, correct?
Correct.
And then the decisions that are made to do with surplus money and all this other stuff would be all of us deciding instead of a group of individuals not keeping us in the loop, correct? Then we would
Correct.
actually make these decisions.
Yeah, at the end of the day, then the city council would be, for lack of a better term, the new medical center board. And you would have the ultimate decision-making ability, the delegation ability, everything that the med center board does right now for the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
I have one more question. July 1st was the target. Is that even possible anymore, or you just absolutely don't know?
We're not gonna hit July 1st.
Okay.
No, I can tell you, we can hope for August 1st, but we're not gonna hit July 1st.
Okay.
Scott?
Question for Tony, I guess, that I would have, and it was brought up by the acting administrator Marsh earlier, but from a liability standpoint, Tony, if this were, whether it dissolved 5 days from now, or 25 days from now, or 30 days from now, but at that point, from a liability standpoint, would anything change? Would the city be under any more, any less, or the same amount of liability as they are today?
Without knowing more about the specific regulations mentioned, which I'll profess I am not intimately familiar with, the way I see it is you're in the same spot today as you would be, because ultimately the medical center board has some independence under the ordinance and the statute that applies to medical center boards, but it's still a city organization. It's not an independent organization. So if the medical center gets pinged for something, whether the med center board is in charge or the city council is in charge, it really all comes from the same pot. That's the way I see it.
Thank you.
So I guess I would echo Kevin insofar as to say, dissolving this, the responsibility of financial outlay, retention programs, PTO, things that are set up to retain an excellent workforce, then becomes the city's responsibility as opposed to the med center board responsibility.
Every ultimate decision, regardless of the topic, would be the city council's decision, so yes.
Okay, and I guess that there is a frightening clause in the purchase agreement that I think I don't know how you minimize that clause, Counselor, whereas when the transition occurs, the city has to release all employees. Is that correct?
I am not familiar with a clause in the agreement that mandates that the city release all the employees.
Okay.
And I know that there's no clause in any of the agreements whereby the new owner is agreeing to hire substantially all of the employees. And I looked that up in terms of how many of you are familiar with the WARN Act, which is the law that says if you have a mass layoff, you have to send certain letters out.
Right.
You can avoid those obligations if there's a clause in the purchase contract that says the new owner is going to bring everybody in. So I know that there's a non-clause there.
Okay.
But to answer your question, Mr. Alderman, once the deal closes, whether it's the medical center board or the city council, to speak frankly, you won't have any use for a workforce designed to operate a nursing home or a medical center because you won't have a nursing home or a medical center.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it becomes then a matter of taking somebody at their word when the buyer says he desires to retain everybody currently employed at the medical center, although it becomes a verbal thing and not necessarily an agreement, but his indication is that he needs those people to operate in the transition. So what would occur is the city doesn't have any need for medical center employees, he does. So there's a momentary boom and then a hire almost simultaneous with that, pending pending what he does with specific employees or whatever he does in his evaluations. Would that be?
I don't know that there's a question there, Alderman.
Well, I guess I.
That would be up to him.
Yeah.
But most, if you look at this from a private sector, let's say it was a nursing home or a medical center
Yeah.
transition. 99% of the situations I've worked on in those is that's generally the way it works, because we all know how tight the hiring market is these days. If a new owner thinks they're gonna bring in an entirely new workforce to keep continuum of care for residents, not a legal opinion, it's just, I don't know how you would make that work unless you brought on most of the employees.
Good.
I have possibly a clarification, the operations transfer agreement under item 10, employees. I think this is what Jake was referring to. Old operator shall terminate the employment of all employees providing services at the facility, a listing of which is attached here to Schedule 10A. Such listing to include the current base salaries of all such employees, and it goes on from there. It also makes us responsible for COBRA as defined.
Thank you, Alderman. Yes, now I'm recalling, there is that clause in there, which I find is an interesting contractual clause, because that was gonna happen anyway, why you had to contractually guarantee that. Now, what that could be, and this is just
It
a
says
guess.
shall.
Shall, so you have to.
We don't have a choice.
You don't have a choice. You didn't have much of a choice. I wonder if that clause came from an agreement that the buyer maybe used in a different context.
Boilerplate?
Perhaps.
I think that's probably right. We ran into other circumstances of that.
And that type of clause would make sense. Let's say you were buying one of 3 nursing homes in a city, right? If you didn't have a clause in that contract like that, then the seller could not terminate people and shift them to another facility, and then you're left with other workforce. Here, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But what I do know is that there's nothing in that agreement that says the buyer agrees to, pending background checks or whatever, hire substantially all of the employees.
And we won't know if that happens unless there is an assigned employment agreement.
Or a hire, or an amendment to that contract where they say, yeah, we're gonna bring them in, but no, until that happens, you wouldn't know.
Right.
Was that questioned at all with the new owner, why that was in there and what the reasoning of it?
You're asking the wrong
Well,
person.
to council's explanation of it, I would guarantee, like, larger city, Milwaukee,
Well,
Madison.
that I
mean,
understand,
yeah,
because
there's
it's just the
multiple-
legality, but
Yeah.
that still doesn't stop you from asking. Why, is there a reason it's there? I mean, we would like a little better explanation of why it's in there, because, like he said, I mean, they take over July 1st, what he's gonna do, walk in, fire him, tell him to walk out the back door and come in the front door, and then you'll hire him?
Essentially, I
Oh,
believe,
and I know they can do that, that's why I said it, but I'm just wondering when the committee, and it's not against the committee, it's just in whole, everybody looking at that contract and that thing, why, was there any questions asked why he had to have that in there, why he didn't have? My understanding when he gave his little presentation to us, he said he was keeping the workforce. Where there it says he shall or can or whatever, get rid of the workforce.
The contract just simply states that the city is not gonna employ those people. When they sell it, well, we wouldn't employ them, we don't need them. It's very
Okay,
simple.
yeah, that
And
makes
if
sense.
you read more into it, it
Yep.
gets more complicated.
Yeah.
It's kind of relieving saying that
It
the
just
city
says
has
we're
no
not gonna employ those
responsibility.
people.
Okay.
Anyone else have any more questions they want to ask or make any comments? Okay. Now, my understanding, even though the board has their next board meeting scheduled, if we go and do this and 5 days later, they would not have the board meeting that was scheduled after that date then? Is that correct?
It's passed tonight and published
Yeah.
Thursday.
published tomorrow morning.
If it's published tomorrow and their meeting is 1 month from now, they would not have another meeting? Okay. If they find that they need a group because of some administrative stuff, because there's a delay in takeover, there was some discussion that we would do a committee. How would that work to create a committee to do med center stuff in the meantime?
It'd be appointed, then it'd be appointed by
So it would come to
you
a council and then we would do it?
and
that-
dictated by ordinance, and by the time
Okay,
we would get to
okay.
that point, we would probably be at that threshold.
Okay,
If you would
by-
go
yeah,
that
by then
route.
we'd probably be closed by the time we do all that kind of stuff. So the likelihood of doing a committee is pretty slim too.
Okay, but, and I guess the follow-up to that is that we do have, shall we say, people available to help us manage that transition, is that correct? If we do away with the board.
We would then manage, so if the council so choose to move and immediately dissolve the board within 5 days of that being publicized via paper, we would continue with what we currently have
Good.
to operate under the administration of Gene Marsh. And Gene then would report to the full council
Okay,
for anything moving forward.
okay, all right. So basically, what we're talking about is dissolving the board and taking the financial responsibility away from the board during this transition and supervising it ourselves.
That would be correct. Then Gene would answer any medical board from the med center.
Right.
She would then answer to this committee.
Why is it that we'd have to abolish the transition team? Because we were, as the council, we appointed the transition team to work with the, you know, because you still had to come back to us to get approval for anything anyhow.
That is.
So my feeling, why wouldn't you just, because you've been working with it all this while, so you kinda got a step ahead of everybody. I mean, otherwise you gotta start all over explaining what they did in between.
That team could still stay intact, but now remember that transition team is advisory.
Right.
Anything would come
Yeah.
directly to you, to this council.
Correct.
Not to the med board. But that advisory team could still stay in open communication.
Right.
Like it currently does today.
But on the med board is just citizen members anyways. It's not like they own nursing homes and they're in this kind of business. They're been citizen members on the Public Works Committee for 25 years, or, you know, you're
Right.
on that committee, that's how you have your experience. There's no reason we couldn't bring him in as a consultant if we had questions. Hey, what did you guys do when you were doing this? If they want to answer, they can. If not, they don't have to. I mean, it's not like these are people that are in the field, they're working 40 hours a week in the nursing home field, and, you know, they're not our employees. It's basically, they're no different than us. I mean, everybody has their strengths and weaknesses.
I have one more question. Jean would then report to the council. When? At a council meeting?
She would report at the full council.
Okay.
Well, she would attend finance and personnel if she had expenditures.
I think that would be, I mean, everything would come to finance.
Just
and
like
personnel.
a department head.
I think we'd have to do some real looking into that. There's a lot of different finances that, you know, their bills do not come through City Hall currently. You know, that is, Gene and Carol sit down, they do all of those bills. Those are adopted, they don't come through City Hall. They get a report, but those don't come through here. So it would be something with Gene, Carol, I think, and how we would get that information to you would be the same way I think they currently get it to the medical board, but it would come to the full council.
Meetings are, okay.
So you would have, just so everybody knows, you would have a whole second set of bills. Currently, what you see today would be the cities. You would see a whole second set of bills that would be from the med board, or from the med center, I apologize.
Okay?
Okay, I've got a legal question. In your opinion, after this draft, do you feel it is in the best interest of the city council to say yes to this
It's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Do you see any legal issues
Yeah.
with this?
I don't see any legal issues with this. It's of the ilk of the council createth the medical center board, the council can take it away. And by repealing the ordinance, then you retain that control over that operation, just as Matt explained. As to whether I think it's a good idea, I think I'm gonna plead the fifth on that, because, you know, that's for all you to decide. And
Yeah.
what I can tell you though is, legally speaking, yeah, you would be stepping in like the board, like the medical center board, but again, to me, that's same horse, different stable. You'd be riding that horse until the transition is complete.
So possibly 2 months.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, my concern is, and I don't, you know, I think we addressed that at the last meeting over the Mid-Center minutes. There is a veil that we are not being presented with. There's stuff behind that veil that we don't know what's going on. And I think it's critical for us to dissolve this board so that we can see what's going on in terms of retention programs. I hate the word, because severance is not, somebody doesn't get a severance until they're actually standing outside, facing in. Is that correct?
Usually.
Yeah. And I think that's putting the cart before the horse. We need to be addressing retention. We need to have a program for retention. The city is not after the dollars. The city is trying to make this work positively for the citizens of Algoma and for the employees at the Med Center. And I'm leery about the lack of forthcomingness that this current board has demonstrated to make that happen. I hear a lot of talk about it, but when you, as demonstrated in our last meeting, accepting or not accepting those minutes, they're not forthcoming. There's almost $250,000 and then some that we don't know how it's being distributed. We don't know who it's being distributed to or who it's intended to be distributed to. And as a result, that's not fair to our citizens, and it's especially not fair to the employees at the Med Center. It scares them. It makes them fearful of a change. We're doing this because we are encouraged and excited about the change, because we have a family-owned business excited about coming and maintaining and expanding this business for the future. It's not a mega corporation. It's a husband and wife with a brother involved that want to run this place, and they want to run it efficiently and correctly. And they can't do it without employees. We need to encourage the employees to stay. We need to, this talk of severance is silliness. We need to have the council, us, determine how to distribute the funds that $250,000 or whatever it takes, but in a way to retain these people, as opposed to just handing them a check and saying adios. That's not a good thing, and it's not a good thing for the city, and it scares employees to death when you do that sort of thing. And that's what's happening. They're frightened. And I think we have to be the adults in the room and take this on and manage this for the next couple of months and address it and control it and make sure that we are getting the funds where they're supposed to go, not where they could possibly go.
What's the source for saying that they're frightened?
Every single month, a little, and we've talked about it, John, and there's an example right here. Every single month, there's a little flyer that comes out with a letter from the administrator that is designed to scare the death out of the employees. And if I was reading this every month, I would be frightened and scared to death that I was going to lose my job. This particular example accuses the administrator of doing some financial shenanigans for his own benefit. It calls into why is the city doing this? We're damaging, and it is absolutely awful that somebody through a transition. I have been through major corporations buying companies and have never, ever seen anything like this from a management from a division that is being sold to somebody else as frightful and as worrisome as something like this, and it happens every month. And it's not fair to the employees. I've been in companies that tens of thousands of people shifted from one logo to another and one management team to another management team, and never, ever had anybody put out anything remotely like this. It's frightening, and it is not good for employee. There you go. There's another one.
This, being hung up in local establishments,
All over the city.
corporations. That was before when the conversations had started, before selling. To build off of what Jake said,
It is not being handled in a responsible management, encouraging people to stay mentality. We want these people to stay, live, and be happy in Algoma. We don't want to chase them out the door. We don't want to hand them a check or their part-time and say adios. That isn't the way you do that. You do it by encouraging people to retain, to give this guy an opportunity. Give him a try. You don't frighten the shit out of him. Pardon my French. I guess I shouldn't use that in a public setting, should I?
So,
And that's what's happening every month. And that's not a good thing.
what responsibility do we have to keep the employees advised or aware of the progress and the sale?
We
The
have.
medical- Let me finish.
Okay.
The medical board has been nothing but very positive about this change. That's a fact. We have prepared more information for the sellers than they have even bothered to come to pick up. We have provided financials. We have been as cooperative as we possibly can. We ask questions that will help us guide our activities to the benefit of all
Okay.
concerned.
All right.
I've heard nothing of that from this council.
Well, I want to talk about this. This is another example of what I'm talking about.
The severance agreement?
Yes.
Okay.
Why would you put something like this in front of an employee? Why would you scare the hell out of them like that? Scott?
That-
Just to keep it very, very high level, I would like to ask council, since he is here and available. Council, have you reviewed that document?
Loosely.
Okay.
I've given it a once over.
In your once over, do you have any?
There are some issues with the legalities of it.
Okay.
And keeping it at a real high level. Anytime you have a mass severance package, okay, there are certain rules that kick in. And they all, pardon my legal dorkiness here, but they all come from what's called the Older Worker Benefit Protection Act. And what that says is that if you have a mass separation, I believe it's of more than 3 employees, certain terms have to be included in the separation agreement in order for it to be enforceable in obtaining all of the releases an employer would want. Specifically, releases of age discrimination claims, right? Anytime you're paying a severance, you want to walk away from that knowing, okay, we've paid, in exchange, we know we're not going to get sued, right? If you want that full knowledge of we're not gonna get sued, then you have to include certain terms. And so in these agreements, you would have to give the employees up to 45 days to consider the agreement. You would then have to give them up to 7 days after signing the agreement to revoke their signature. Right? Only then it would go into effect. But also to comply with the law and to make those releases enforceable, you have to include certain demographic information about who's all being offered a severance and who's not. Now, if every single employee is being offered a severance, that's an easy chart to fill out, right? Everybody. If not, and I noticed on the form that there was an option, a box check where some folks may not get the severance, then you would have to say, you know, if you have an employment classification of being novice here, nurses, okay? If you have 10 nurses and 4 receive severance and 6 do not, you would have to list in that chart that 4 of the folks got the severance and you'd have to list their ages, right? And that's where it's like, oh, all the 25-year-olds got severance and all the 65-year-olds did not, right? That's why there's that extra 45 days too to review, so that way they can do investigations. So that agreement from a legal perspective, I certainly would say, regardless of how you decide, whether you wanted to give people a severance payment or a separation payment, that would have to be retooled a little bit to make sure that it's going to be applied.
I got a question on that when you're done. Aren't severances where if the company goes out of business or shuts down, then you give your employees severances where when you, like Wisconsin Label changes names every couple of years, they get bought out. Are they doing severance packages for that? I mean,
No.
You're just changing your name and having different employees, or people are buying each other out?
Yeah.
Right? This is what we're doing.
One of the things, Alderman, that we talked about before, let's say private company A gets bought by private company B.
Correct.
In that purchase and sale agreement, whether it's an asset sale or whatever, there would ordinarily be a clause in there saying, you know, upon closing, all employees of company A will be terminated by company B and will be offered employment with company A.
And here's your new welcome package.
And here's, now you're on this benefits, now you're on whatever. That's usually how it would go. Now, a severance package can be issued at any time. You know, you can let a single person go because of whatever, and you can offer a separation package. There's no rhyme or reason. And you don't have to offer a
Well, that's my
severance
question.
package.
Why are we even talking severance packages with this right now? I don't understand.
He
We're
was,
not closing
he was
for good.
submitted that form, not through the council, but through the board,
And we don't know this because they don't have to tell us this.
because they don't have to tell us. Correct. Because it's done in a closed session.
From a legal standpoint, because it sounds like you've been there before. Part of the issues are that they don't know what benefits they might get. Is that normal?
The employees not knowing what benefits they might get
From the new employer?
is normal. A natural trepidation is normal. What'll usually happen is the deal will be announced, and then there'll be a period while the final I's and T's are tied up to. Usually the buyer then will come in with some of their benefits people or whatever and say, okay, you know, you had UHC, now you're gonna be on Prevea 360, and here's what the benefits are gonna be. And then because of that termination and rehiring, then they'd be eligible to enroll in the buyer's benefits and everything. There usually are transition things like that. I mean, but that's not so much a legal thing, that's more of a cultural thing.
Yeah.
There are some where it's like, oh, you're not our boss anymore, and now we need to figure this out. That happens too. Or the good deals have a transition.
Okay. Thank you.
Yanni Abraham is the company that
Any other
has
questions or comments anybody wants to make?
Gene has something.
Jane's got some.
Just for the council's information, Yanni Abraham leads a company that is going to be introducing the benefits to the employees. They requested this week all of the employees' date of birth, social security number, address, dependents, social security numbers, dependents' birthdays, primarily for the purpose of obtaining health insurance quotes, you know, for coverage. They at this point do not have anything together yet, but they are the company that will be assigned to meet with the staff when it's done, when it's ready.
Sounds like they're gonna hire people, doesn't it?
Well, that sounds like a typical transition plan.
Yes.
You know, because, well, I'm not gonna profess to be a benefits expert, but yeah, they'll ask for all that information so they can run the risk and analyze it from that standpoint. And frankly, that can be a factor in a deal. You know, if we're walking into a really high-risk group of employees, there's no obligation for a buyer to still buy. It's all part of the due diligence.
I mean, has the new buyer come in at all, and when he talked to the employees saying that he is gonna keep them, or give any indication that he's gonna keep the employees, or?
We had a meet and greet with Sam Berry and his wife. As many employees as could, and truly the majority did come. And he did talk that it was his intent to keep all employees. That was quite a while ago, and as time progresses, people just get a little bit more anxious. You have someone whose husband is losing insurance, and it stirs people up, because now she's out there talking to people, I don't know what I'm gonna have for coverage, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And that's what kind of goes back and forth between the employees, and you try to calm that. You try to encourage them that, hey, if this is something, you know, for example, we had a contract that we had talked to the buyer about assuming, and he didn't. It was our employee assistance program, which provides up to 5 sessions of counseling for employees at no charge. And the board continued that contract through June of 2023, so that the employees would have somebody that they could talk to if they're feeling the stress of all of this. And it doesn't have to be work-related. It can be your husband beats you or whatever. You know, I mean, those are the things that we deal with very commonly with our employees. And so, you know, this is available for them for a whole year at no charge to the employee.
We also have a question, the transition team has a question out about the healthcare benefits and whether or not there's a gap between hiring and when healthcare kicks in. It's incredibly important if you've got people who have chronic illnesses that are on active care at this point. So then it's a question of, we have not heard back whether or not they are going to have coverage day one or not. If that's the case, do we consider coverage in the form of a temporary gap coverage for employees?
What you can do there, and in several circumstances, usually they'll be immediately eligible for coverage on a deal, but if there is a potential gap, how that's usually handled is that either the seller or the buyer agrees to front the cost of COBRA.
That's
Yeah.
what
So-
and that's part of what we have been discussing. When we see agreements,
You had said it was in that part where they shall with the employees, and then you said COBRA, so they probably got that figured in, so.
so, but it's a question of, we don't know what they're offering yet, we don't know when they're offering it yet. We still don't have a closing date. You talk about 45 days, is that before the sale goes through on the potential for severance, or is that after?
From the date you're presented with the severance agreement, you have 45 days to consider
Not necessarily a question, but just more or less a comment. Regarding the pending sale, I had sent Alderman Pavic, being on that board for the medical center, an email back on March 23rd, just with some general concerns, and also options for retention plans, a true retention plan. And at that point, and I've said it all along in several meetings, whether it be in finance meetings or council meetings, both myself and everybody that's up here right now, it's not necessarily about not putting the funds that are available into the pockets of the employees, but that particular example that I had emailed, and you did share it at the meeting, which I do appreciate, it is in the meeting minutes. It's available for public consumption if you do make a request. And in that meeting, I used a round sum of $5,000. If it comes to we have enough in the kitty for each individual to have $5,000. A true retention plan is to give them $1,250 at 3 months, $1,250 at 6 months, and then maybe the $2,500 remaining at 12 months. That is a true retention plan that can make sure that the new owner is at least, I mean, again, there's no guarantees in life except for death and taxes, but it gives him a pretty good, solid 12 months of employees. Now, hang on. That is $5,000. That was the example that I used, and I was just spitballing. At our last council meeting, when the question came up, what was actually discussed and decided, the only thing that I've got out of that, and I went back and watched the video, the only thing that I got out of that was that it was $4 an hour for every hour worked in 2021 for all employees that were full-time employees through 2021 at a 2,080 hour work schedule per annual. We're talking about $8,300. Now, I know for a fact that there's tons of overtime that was worked on plenty of employees that are up there. We're talking from 8,000 to maybe as much as 11 or 12,000, depending on how many hours worked. That is a big lump of money. There were no details that were discussed. I asked for further details. Are we going to give those employees just here's your $10,000 check on the day that the deal's done, and then they have zero obligation to stay with the new company? That is beyond concerning for myself. It's straight out frightening. With that, there's been tons of discussion, and this could probably go on for hours and hours and hours, all night long. I will formally make a motion to move forward with repealing ordinance number 835.
Second.
Aaron, would you do a roll call?
Mehring,
Yes.
Dashlet,
Yes.
Lautenbach,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Meverden,
Yes.
Boer,
No.
Pavic. Abstain.
Five yes, 1 no, 1 abstain.
Furthermore, Madam Mayor, I would like to make a second motion, and I'd like to make a motion bypassing the second reading of this.
Second.
Could we get a roll call on that?
1 moment. Schmidt,
Yes.
Dashlet,
Yes.
Mehring,
Yes.
Meverden,
Yes.
Lautenbach,
Yes.
Boer,
Yes.
Pavic.
Abstain.
Okay, motion carries. Okay, anything else to come before the council? Not, the next meeting is set for Tuesday, July 5th at 6 PM. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, then I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned.